The chill of the late autumn morning seemed to seep through the window panes and into the very marrow of Chloe's bones, a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. She sat at the polished mahogany desk in their shared home office, a space that, until this moment, had symbolized their partnership. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, oblivious star in her collapsing universe. In her hand, she held a single sheet of paper, an innocuous-looking bank statement that had arrived in a plain white envelope, addressed to Julian, but mistakenly opened by her. It wasn't from their joint account, nor was it from his personal savings account she knew about. This was something different, something secret. The name on the account was his alone. The balance, a staggering six-figure sum, made her breath catch in her throat. It was a number that didn't align with his salary as an architect, not even with the generous bonuses his firm, Sterling Designs, was known for. This was a secret well, deep and dark, and filled with money she couldn't account for. For 10 years, she had believed their marriage was built on a foundation of trust and transparency. They had shared dreams, a home, a life. She'd supported his ambition, celebrating his successes as if they were her own. The thought that, behind the facade of their shared life, he had been quietly building a separate, hidden fortune felt like a physical blow. Her first instinct was to storm into the living room, to wave the paper in his face and demand an explanation. But her anger was quickly doused by a cold wave of caution. Julian was a meticulous planner, a man who thought 3 steps ahead in every aspect of his life, from the blueprints he designed to the investments they made together. A man like that didn't make mistakes. An account like this wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate, calculated secret. What was he planning? Was he preparing to leave her? Or was it something else? Something worse? The questions swirled in her mind, each more painful than the last. She looked at the statement again, her eyes catching on the name of the bank, a private institution she had never heard of. With trembling fingers, she folded the paper, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it under a stack of her own paperwork. Confrontation would get her a rehearsed lie or a gaslit denial. No, if she was going to understand what was happening to her marriage, she needed to be just as meticulous as her husband. She needed to watch, to listen, and to uncover the truth on her own terms. The game, whatever it was, had begun. And Chloe, to her own surprise, found a core of ice forming around her heart. She would play it. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception. Chloe moved through her life with a practiced grace, a smile fixed on her lips, her voice never wavering from its usual warmth. She made Julian his morning coffee, asked about his day at the office, and listened to his stories about challenging clients and design breakthroughs. On the surface, everything was perfect, a portrait of marital bliss. But beneath the calm facade, Chloe was a hunter, her senses sharpened, her eyes missing nothing. She noticed the way Julian's phone was now permanently attached to his hip, the screen angled away from her whenever a notification chimed. She registered the slight hesitation in his voice when she asked about his investment portfolio, a topic they had always discussed with open enthusiasm. He'd brush it off, saying, "The usual, darling. Nothing exciting to report." But his eyes would dart away for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of concealment that she had never seen before. Her nights became sleepless. While Julian slept soundly beside her, a peaceful rhythm to his breathing, Chloe would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The name of the private bank, Argentum Financial, was a dead end. Their website was a fortress of corporate jargon and exclusivity, offering no client portal or public information. It was a bank for the shadows, for secrets just like the one Julian was keeping. Frustration gnawed at her, but it also fueled a stubborn resolve. He had built a wall. She would find a way to climb it. The opportunity she had been waiting for came on a Tuesday evening. Julian was on a conference call in the garden, his voice a low, professional murmur carrying on the breeze. He had left his laptop open on the desk, the screen glowing with architectural renderings. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a violation of the trust she once held sacred, but he had shattered that trust first. Taking a deep breath, she sat down, her fingers hovering over the trackpad. His email was open, but a quick scan revealed nothing out of the ordinary, just work correspondence and newsletters. She delved deeper into his documents, and there it was, a folder tucked away inside another folder, labeled simply Assets. Inside, she found spreadsheets, property deeds they co-owned, and another password-protected file named Nightingale. Her blood ran cold. Nightingale. It sounded so delicate, so benign. What was it? She tried all the usual passwords: her birthday, their anniversary, the name of their first pet. Nothing worked. Defeated, she was about to close the window when her eyes caught a different thread. In his sent emails, she found a chain of correspondence with a commercial real estate agent. The emails were vague, discussing due diligence and zoning permits for a specific address: 1124 Corbin Avenue. A quick search on her own phone brought up a satellite image of a modest two-story office building downtown, the building that housed Sterling Designs, Julian's firm. He wasn't just an employee. The emails hinted at an acquisition. He was talking about buying the land his own office was built on. The secret wasn't just about a hidden bank account. It was bigger, more ambitious, and far more complex than she could have ever imagined. The discovery of 1124 Corbin Avenue was the key that unlocked the first of many doors. The Nightingale file remained an enigma, a locked box within a locked room, but the land was real, tangible. It was a target. Chloe spent the next few days in a fugue of quiet, intense research. While Julian was at the office, unknowingly sitting in the very building that had become the focal point of his secret ambition, Chloe was transforming their home office into a war room. She learned that the building was owned by a family trust, the McAllisters, who had held the property for over 50 years. They were an old money family, notoriously private and, according to a few articles she unearthed, resistant to selling their legacy assets. Julian's attempt to acquire it must have involved a significant, very persuasive offer. An offer likely funded by the secret Argentum account. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that was both horrifying and strangely exhilarating. Julian wasn't planning to leave her. He was planning to ascend. He wanted to be not just a partner at his firm, but the landlord, the one who held all the cards. It was a power play of the highest order. The secrecy, the hidden money, it was all designed to give him an unassailable position of control. And where did she fit into this grand design? Was she the supportive wife, standing proudly in the shadow of his success, oblivious to the fact that their shared foundation was a lie? The thought sent a fresh wave of cold fury through her. She had her own resources. Before her marriage, Chloe had been a successful graphic designer with a respectable portfolio of investments. After she and Julian had children, she had stepped back, channeling her creative energies into their home and family life, managing their joint finances while he focused on his career. He saw her as the domestic manager, the keeper of the hearth. He had underestimated her. He had forgotten the sharp, analytical mind that had built her own success before him. She had a private inheritance from her grandmother, a nest egg Julian knew about but had always dismissed as her little fund. He had no idea of its true value or of how carefully she had managed it over the years. It was her turn to have a secret. With a newfound clarity, Chloe picked up the phone and called a commercial real estate broker, a woman named Iris, known for her discretion and her tenacity. She explained the situation in hypothetical terms: an investor looking to acquire a specific downtown property, one that was not officially on the market. She gave Iris the address. "The McAllister Building," Iris said, a low whistle in her voice. "That's a tough nut to crack. They've turned down offers for years. You'd have to come in with something spectacular to even get their attention." "I want you to get their attention," Chloe said, her voice steady and clear. "I want you to find out the status of any current offers, and I want you to prepare a counteroffer, a spectacular one. Use a shell corporation. I want complete anonymity." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This sounds serious," Iris said. "It is," Chloe replied, a faint metallic taste in her mouth. "It's the most serious I've ever been." As she hung up the phone, she glanced at her reflection in the dark screen of Julian's laptop. The woman looking back at her was not the same one who had opened that bank statement a week ago. Her eyes were harder, her expression unreadable. She was no longer just a wife. She was a strategist. And she was just getting started. Iris proved to be worth every penny of her formidable reputation. Within 48 hours, she called back. "You were right," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "There is an active offer on 1124 Corbin Avenue, a very aggressive one. It's an all-cash deal, well above the property's appraised value, with a quick closing date. The buyer is shielded by a numbered company, but my sources tell me the pressure is high. They're trying to push the McAllisters into a corner." Chloe's knuckles were white as she gripped the phone. It was him. The speed, the aggression, the anonymity. It all had Julian's fingerprints on it. "How high is the offer?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside her. Iris named a number that made Chloe's breath hitch. It was more than the balance in the Argentum account. Julian must have leveraged other assets, or perhaps the account had grown since the statement she found. It was a bold, almost reckless move. He was betting everything on this. The McAllisters are considering it, Iris continued. The family patriarch passed away last year, and the children are less sentimental about the property. An offer like this is tempting. If you want to counter, you can't just beat it. You have to blow it out of the water. Chloe looked out the window at the familiar, peaceful garden, where Julian had taken the call that sealed her suspicions. The world looked the same, but she was seeing it through new eyes. She saw the chessboard now, the pieces in motion. He had made his move, confident in his secrecy. He would never see her coming. Blow it out of the water, she repeated softly. Then, with a voice as firm as steel, she gave her instructions. Prepare a counteroffer, 20% higher than theirs, all cash. Offer to close in half the time, and add a non-refundable 7-figure deposit upon acceptance. I want them to know this is not a negotiation. It's a final statement. There was a moment of stunned silence from Iris. 20%? Chloe, that's a significant amount of capital. I have it, Chloe said simply. The words hung in the air, a declaration of independence she hadn't realized she was ready to make. The little fund from her grandmother, which Julian had so casually dismissed, had been expertly invested for over a decade. It had grown into a formidable fortune, her own secret well of power. I'll need to set up the shell corporation and the escrow account immediately, Iris said, her voice now buzzing with excitement. This is the kind of deal legends are made of. I'll have the paperwork drawn up by morning. After the call, Chloe walked through her silent house. Every object, the photos on the mantel, the furniture they had picked out together, the art on the walls, seemed like a relic from another life. She was betraying the man she loved, using their own tactics against him. The thought should have filled her with guilt, but instead it brought a strange and terrifying sense of calm. He had created this secret world of shadows and hidden assets. He had taught her the rules by breaking them. She was simply learning to play the game he had started. That night, as she transferred the necessary funds, each click of the mouse felt like a hammer blow, forging a new future, one she would control. The offer was submitted the next morning, a silent missile aimed at the heart of her husband's secret empire. Now, all she could do was wait. The silence that followed the submission of her offer was the most nerve-wracking part of Chloe's plan. For 2 days, she heard nothing. She went about her routine, a hollow shell performing the duties of a wife and mother, while her mind was miles away, locked in a silent bidding war. She watched Julian for any sign of change, but he remained coolly confident, the master of his universe. He spoke of the future, of a potential trip to Italy they might take in the spring, and Chloe smiled and nodded, a knot of ice tightening in her stomach. He was planning their future with one hand while dismantling it with the other. The call from Iris came on a Thursday afternoon while Chloe was pruning the roses in her garden, the thorns snagging at her gloves. They've received the offer, Iris said, and Chloe could hear the smile in her voice. To say it made an impression would be an understatement. The McAllister siblings are ecstatic. They've put the other buyer on immediate hold and are reviewing our paperwork. They want to accept. And Julian's side? Chloe asked, snipping a dead rose from its stem with a satisfying crunch. Scrambling, Iris replied. They're demanding to know who the counterbidder is, but the Shell Corporation is ironclad. They're completely in the dark. As far as they're concerned, a ghost with an infinite bank account just swept in and torpedoed their deal. They're trying to figure out if they can even compete. That evening, the first cracks in Julian's polished veneer began to show. He came home late, his tie already loosened, a furrow in his brow that hadn't been there that morning. He poured himself a whiskey, forgoing his usual glass of wine with dinner. Tough day? Chloe asked, her voice a study in casual concern. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. You could say that. A big project I've been working on. Hit a snag. Oh no, what happened? A competitor, he said, his voice clipped. A phantom. Someone came in at the 11th hour with a ridiculous offer. It's unprofessional, reckless. Chloe placed a comforting hand on his arm, her touch a spark of static between them. Well, can you counter their offer? You've always been so good at finding a way. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I'm not sure. This isn't just about money. It's about power. Someone is trying to send a message. He looked at her then, his eyes searching hers, but he saw only the concerned wife he expected to see. He saw nothing of the strategist who was, at that very moment, the architect of his defeat. The irony was so thick she could taste it. He was right. A message was being sent. He just didn't know it was from the woman sitting right in front of him. Later that night, she heard him pacing in the office downstairs, his voice a low, angry murmur on the phone. The hunter had become the hunted, and he had no idea the trap had been laid from inside his own home. The next few days were a quiet, brutal war of attrition. Julian was a caged animal. He spent hours locked in the home office, his voice a low, furious growl on the phone. Chloe would catch snippets of his conversations, words like unacceptable, untraceable, and leverage. He was pulling on all his strings, trying to find an angle, a weakness, a name. But the Shell Corporation, a bland and anonymous entity named Northwood Holdings, gave him nothing. It was a digital fortress, and Chloe held the only key. She watched him, a dispassionate observer to his self-inflicted torment. She saw the exhaustion creeping into the corners of his eyes, the way his confident posture had been replaced by a tense, hunched defensiveness. For the first time in their marriage, he looked lost. His desperation gave her an idea. While he was out one afternoon, taking a last-ditch meeting with his financial advisors, Chloe returned to the Nightingale file on his laptop. His recent stress might have made him careless. She sat at his desk, the scent of his cologne still hanging faintly in the air, and thought about the name. Nightingale, a songbird. It wasn't a project code. It felt personal. She thought about his life, their life together. Anniversaries, birthdays, locations. Nothing worked. Then, a memory surfaced. Years ago, on their first real vacation in a small village in the south of France, he had woken her up in the middle of the night, pulling her to the balcony of their rustic hotel room. "Listen," he had whispered, his arm around her. The air was filled with the beautiful, melodic song of a nightingale. He had turned to her, his eyes shining in the moonlight, and said, "I'll never forget this sound. It's the sound of pure, simple happiness." Her fingers trembled as she typed it in. Not Nightingale, but the name of the French village they had stayed in. Gordes. The file opened. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It wasn't a spreadsheet or a property deed. It was a detailed architectural plan, complete with stunning, lifelike renderings. It was a house. A magnificent, modern glass and steel mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was the most beautiful home she had ever seen, a masterpiece of design. It was a house she had never seen before, a dream she had never been told about. At the bottom of the blueprint, in the title block where the client's name should be, was a single name, Julian Sterling. And underneath the project name, the Nightingale. This was his secret dream, a new life, in a new house, built with secret money. But for whom? Was this a future for them? A grand surprise? Or was it a future for him, and someone else entirely? The ambiguity was more painful than a clear-cut betrayal. Just as this new, dizzying question hit her, her phone buzzed. It was Iris. Her voice was calm, but triumphant. "It's done," she said. "The McAllisters have signed. Northwood Holdings is now the official owner of 1124 Corbin Avenue. The deed is being recorded as we speak. Congratulations, Chloe. You own the land his office sits on." Chloe closed the Nightingale file, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had won. She had beaten him at his own game. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the image of the beautiful, secret house. She walked to the window and looked out at her manicured garden, at the life she had so carefully built. It all felt like a movie set now. The real story was the one she had just uncovered, a story of secrets and ambition, culminating in a silent, seismic transfer of power. The queen had just taken the castle, and the king had no idea. Julian came home just as the sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the lawn. The front door opened and closed with a quiet finality. Chloe, who had been waiting in the living room, watched him as he stood in the hallway. His shoulders slumped in a way she had never seen before. The fight had gone out of him completely. He looked not just tired, but hollowed out. He didn't seem to notice her at first. He dropped his briefcase by the door with a heavy thud and ran a hand through his hair, his gaze unfocused. "Julian?" she said softly. He started, his head snapping up. "Chloe, I didn't see you there." "You're home late," she said, her voice neutral. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "There was no point in staying. It's over." He walked past her and into the kitchen, heading straight for the whiskey. He didn't bother with a glass this time, taking a long pull directly from the bottle. "The Corbin deal?" Chloe asked, following him. "Gone," he confirmed, his voice rough. "The mystery buyer closed the deal this afternoon. Signed, sealed, delivered. They own it. Whoever they are, they won." He slammed the bottle down on the counter, making the granite ring. "I just can't figure it out. No one spends that kind of money so recklessly. It doesn't make financial sense. It was personal. Someone wanted to make sure I lost. Chloe watched him, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. She felt a flicker of pity for the defeated man in front of her, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard memory of the secrets he had kept. The bank account, the Nightingale house. He saw himself as the victim, wronged by some shadowy corporate raider. The arrogance was still there, even in defeat. It had never occurred to him to look closer to home. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, and the lie felt smooth and practiced on her tongue. He finally looked at her, truly looked at her, but his eyes were clouded with his own failure. All that work, all that planning, for nothing. This was the moment, the culmination of all her sleepless nights, her quiet investigation, her daring gamble. The power in their marriage had been a quiet, unseen current for years, always flowing in his direction. Now she could feel it reverse, a tidal wave of truth she was about to unleash. She straightened up, her posture shifting from concerned wife to something else, something he didn't recognize. "Actually, Julian," she said, her voice losing its soft, sympathetic edge and taking on a crystalline clarity, "I think we should talk. In the office." He blinked, confused by her sudden change in tone. "Talk about what?" "Our future," she said, "and a new real estate acquisition." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked towards the home office, the space where her world had first tilted on its axis. She could feel his hesitant steps behind her. She didn't look back. She walked into the room and sat down, not in her usual chair, but in his. The large leather executive chair that had always been his throne. In the center of the gleaming mahogany desk, she had placed a single, crisp business envelope. He stopped in the doorway, a deep sense of unease finally dawning on his face. "Chloe, what is this?" She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Sit down, Julian," she said, her voice as calm and unyielding as a frozen lake. "I am the new owner of 1124 Corbin Avenue, and I think it's time we discussed my plans for the property." Julian stared at her, his face a mask of utter bewilderment. He looked from her cold, steady eyes to the expensive leather of his own chair that she now occupied, as if trying to solve an impossible equation. A small, disbelieving laugh escaped his lips. That's not possible. That's absurd. This is a joke, right? A very strange, unfunny joke." Chloe didn't smile. She calmly pushed the envelope across the polished surface of the desk towards him. "The deed was recorded in the name of Northwood Holdings this afternoon. You'll find a copy inside, along with a letter of introduction from my legal team. As of today, I am your landlord." His hands trembled as he reached for the envelope. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the legal documents inside. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, pale sheen. The bravado, the anger, the arrogance, it all dissolved in an instant, replaced by a profound, bottomless shock. He sank into the chair opposite her, the papers fluttering from his grasp onto the floor. "How?" he whispered, the word barely audible. "You taught me how," Chloe said, her voice even. "You taught me the value of secrets, of private accounts and hidden assets." She leaned forward slightly. "Argentum Financial. Does the name ring a bell? An account with a six-figure balance that you seem to have forgotten to mention. That was your first mistake. Your second was underestimating me." He flinched as if she had struck him. The mention of the bank was a direct hit, a confirmation that his carefully constructed secret world had been completely breached. "Chloe, I was going to tell you," he stammered, the words hollow and unconvincing. "It was a surprise." "A surprise?" Chloe's voice was laced with ice. "What kind of surprise requires a secret multi-million-dollar land deal and a hidden fortune, Julian? What were you planning?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "What is Nightingale?" If he was pale before, he now looked like a ghost. The name of the secret house, his ultimate private dream, falling from her lips, broke him completely. "You saw that," he murmured, defeated. He finally lifted his head, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine, desperate honesty in his eyes. "It was for you. For us. I wanted to build you a palace. I wanted to come to you with everything. Not just the firm, but the very ground it stood on. I wanted to show you what I was capable of. The house, that was going to be our real home. A symbol of everything I'd achieved." The tragic flaw in his logic hit Chloe with the force of a physical blow. He hadn't been building a life with her. He had been building a stage for her, where she would be the adoring audience to his grand performance. He had cut her out of the entire process, deeming her unfit or unworthy to be a partner in his ambition, only a beneficiary of its spoils. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a spectator. Your achievement was built on lies, Julian, she said, her voice softening with a sad finality. It was built in the dark. A life built on that foundation isn't a palace, it's a prison. You didn't do this for us. You did this for you. She stood up, walking over to the window and looking out into the twilight. The war was over. The victory was hers. But the marriage was a casualty, its wounds too deep to ever truly heal. You can continue to work at Sterling Designs, she said, her back still to him. It's a profitable business, and I have no interest in ruining the careers of the other people who work there. But make no mistake, from now on, you will pay your rent to Northwood Holdings. You will report to a board that I control. Every day, when you walk into that office, you will be walking into a building that I own. She finally turned to face him. The powerful, meticulous architect she had married was gone, replaced by a broken man sitting amidst the ruins of his own secrets. There was no anger left in her, only a vast, empty sense of clarity. She had her own future to build now, not in a glass house on a cliff, but on the solid ground of her own strength and intelligence. As for our marriage, she said, her voice quiet but firm, that is a discussion for another day. For now, I think you should find somewhere else to sleep tonight. This story shows that strength can be found in the most unexpected places, and that truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation on which a real life can be built. It's a reminder that true partnership is about shared struggles, not just shared successes. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope and empowerment.